Thank you, Greg, for that very generous introduction. And whenever I hear about my old responsibilities at the World Bank, I get exhausted and I want to sit down. So I hope that that I'll be able to make it through this keynote and share a little bit with you about what is happening in the world of sustainability, what's happening in the world, especially of climate change and sustainability. And with the backdrop of what's happening in 2 weeks, which is the world getting together at Rio to celebrate Rio Plus 20, the 20th anniversary of the Earth Summit, to take stock about has the world been able to cope with the sustainability challenges that were faced 20 years ago, and what is the world going to look like going forward. I'm not happy to report that the news is not good, and things have actually deteriorated on the sustainability front over the last 20 years, and the news is not good. We're not expecting much to come out of Rio, but let's see. We've got a couple more weeks for the people to do the preparation. Sustainable transportation coming up as a major theme, not just in terms of how to think about more mass transit solutions, whether they be metros, whether it be walkable cities, whether it be BRT systems, but how do you also do demand management more smartly through congestion pricing, parking charges, and the like, value capture and the like. Efficient environmental services, again, here is really reducing waste, particularly on water and waste through better prices, better incentives, incentives for recycling, rebates for conversion to more efficient appliances and fixtures, and the like. Energy. Now, most urban places are not responsible for the generation of energy. In some places they are, and we'll talk about Austin, but often they are actually buying from the national or regional grids, and so they don't have as strong a policy influence in terms of their own infrastructure investment. But those cities that are moving in the sustainability world are basically putting down markers in saying that they're going to be purchasing a larger share of their energy from renewable sources. They're using feed-in tariffs or long-term power purchase agreements to signal that, often subsidized through national subsidies or cross-subsidies. They're thinking about how to build more distributed energy systems using consumer-led generation, and also investing quite a bit in reducing consumption through energy efficiency programs for both commercial as well as households. While not particularly in the theme of infrastructure, but it is, Greg, stuck to the ground in big things, how to invest in energy efficient buildings and industry. And that's important, again, for urban infrastructure because of the demand management impact. And so, again, if you think about and read what the cities are putting in place in terms of their strategy, efficient buildings and efficient industry is really at the very, very top of their agenda because it actually is seen as something that is a win-win for the cities as they move forward. So then we turn to finance. So we say, well, we got our strategy, we have some policy tools, but we have to finance all this. And again, the theme here is the familiar and the new. So the familiar are the list, and I just have some of them. You are all much more expert than I in terms of municipal finance and municipal infrastructure finance challenge, whether it's looking at possibilities for intergovernmental transfers, raising revenues from your own fiscal capacity using some new techniques, borrowing, depending a little bit on the investment climate. But we do see one of the issues is a perennial mismatch between tenors and infrastructure life, and especially in developing countries, weak capital markets, which complicate the picture. Those we'll find in our regular infrastructure programs, but when you add sustainability lens, you have a different set and a more challenging set of issues. One is affordability, especially in the energy sector. The new lower emission technologies are still not, without a price on carbon, competitive with fossil fuel alternatives. And so you do have either cross-subsidization, you've got special subsidies coming, you've got some market mechanisms in those places that have chosen to go to the market, but affordability is an issue. For those infrastructure investments that are in the world of the public-private partnership, the borrowing capacity on the private sector side is very difficult because of the lack of stability and certainty on the policies and regulations in this field, particularly with respect to the longevity of things like feed-in tariffs power purchase agreements, and the like. So it's difficult for them to get financing. They're overcoming technology risks, especially in first movers. There are network effects. It all may be very well to build a more sustainable infrastructure pattern in your city or region, but if that's not connected to a national grid that is actually compatible with where you're working, it may not work. Implementation capacity for many of these new technologies and new approaches is low. And as always, stakeholder resistance is there. You have powerful interests that are being at play here, both in terms of business, in terms of those that are protecting old ways of life, as well as those, and we'll talk about resettlement, that may have to be moved because of the new types of investments. So what we're looking for and what we're seeing is new kinds of investment strategies and funds that are trying to bridge these gaps for sustainability. And what do they look like? One is to, the Girl Scouts, we say, make new friends, but keep your old ones. So there's an old song like that. So one of them is to green the public financial institutions. And you have balance sheets that are there, whether they're multilateral development banks, domestic banks, organizations, bilateral organizations like OPIC. Try to build criteria into those banks and into those financial institutions that will value more aggressively sustainable infrastructure, sustainable patterns of growth. You have in other places creation of new banks. The United Kingdom is putting together a national green bank. Connecticut has a green bank. Colleagues at the Brookings Institution are putting together soon a proposal for a series of state green banks here in the United States. On the international front, there's been a pledge of $100 billion per year in climate finance for the developing countries from the OECD countries. Has been pledged, not fully funded. What's it going to look like? It will probably look like funds that will either help lower the cost, bridge the technology cost between traditional technologies and new, or help reduce the risks for first movers through a number of risk mitigation mechanisms. The carbon markets are there. They're weak right now. The price is weak. The spread is weak. For the least developing countries, they've been relying on the clean development mechanism as a way to be able to use climate finance to help meet some of their needs. That is a bit in disarray right now and is not well suited really in today's economy for citywide applications. But that's the next frontier. The big frontier, which is the holy grail, is how to use some of this public finance to really leverage in private capital big time. So again, in climate circles, what you're seeing are people thinking about how to leverage in pension funds, private equity funds, and backstop green bonds at scale. And so there hasn't really been a lot of really good practice in this area, but you'll see a lot of experimentation going in. So let me then move to what's happening in three cases. How are these sets of strategies, policies, and finance coming together in a OECD country like Mexico, or emerging economy, the United States, and then in Jakarta. So let's start in Mexico. Mexico, like many countries, we know Curitiba, we know experiments, Brazil, Colombia, and the like, experimented with putting in place pilot bus rapid transit corridors in Mexico City and Leon. And these were very successful. They were hard to put together. There were a lot of institutional and political risks associated with these. But the government of Mexico, as part of its broader growth strategy, as part of its urban strategy, and as part of its climate strategy, said that what they wanted to do was to extend this practice of putting in mass transit solutions countrywide. Both extend within Mexico City and Leon to other corridors, but to actually put in place a program that would move to scaling up. So they knew they faced political economy risks. You had political leaders in Mexico City and Leon that wanted to push this. They were kind of forward thinkers, but not all cities had that political dynamic. Institutional inertia, very hard to do these things. You knew this better than I, coordinating across multiple sectors. Competition for scarce resources. Why, maybe cities said, this isn't what I want to do exactly with my own fiscal resources. Mexico wanted to move to low emission buses. One, because they thought that would help them reduce their emissions, but two, they want to get in the market low-emission buses. They want to see if they can become actually a node for manufacturing of these buses that could serve not just Mexico, but other countries in the region. And you had to also overcome a nascent domestic finance or private sector engagement, since many of the bus operations were going to be in the private sector hands. So what have they done? They created two new institutions, FONADIN, which is a development arm of Banobras for infrastructure, which is being funded from part of the revenue from the toll system in Mexico, and ProTram, which is a part of Banobras as well, which is sort of the policy arm to try to help cities think through, plan for, do the program development to be able to move to some of these solutions.